Maybe you only want what you can't have. Never seem to be satisfied till it all goes bad. Maybe I should just give someone else a chance. Why should I sit alone and be sad while you fumble the best you ever had? It's not fair to me or my heart. I was forced to start over when we fell apart. Could've had it all, but you pushed me right into his arms. You wanted to break, I wanted to stay. Look what you made me give my love away. You made a mistake. Say that you've changed, but it's too late. I gave my love away. Don't play the victim now. Let's state the facts. You're the one who left. I just quit taking you back. Maybe I should just give someone else a chance. Why should I sit here waiting on you? I am in a forever or never type of It's not fair to me or my heart. I was forced to start over when we fell apart. Could've had it all, but you pushed me right into his arms. You wanted to break, I wanted to stay.
Lights off, transparency on. Late night marriage with the riches. Late night marriage with the riches. You need that real talk, this is what you want. Lights off, transparency on. Let's go.
Hey, what's going on, fam? What's going on? Welcome to Late Night Marriage with the Riches. I'm Damon Rich.
I'm Tamika Rich.
And thank you for joining us on tonight. We are so glad to have you. You good?
Mm-hmm.
You got your mic together?
I think so.
You should probably bring a little closer to you.
You think?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm loud.
There you go.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It's the tap. So that it's not in my throat.
Yeah. It just need to hear you and you like to look this way. So, thank you for joining us tonight. We are so excited to have you with us tonight. Tonight we are continuing the road to 26, us recounting leading up to our 26-year of marriage, us recounting and sharing some lessons out of our 26-year journey. And we are glad to have you in the building with us. Listen, I hope, we weren't on last Wednesday. We were all preparing for the storm, and I hope that you got through the storm well and intact. I know there are many who did not. Let us stop and pause and pray for them.
Yes.
And covering them as they're going through this time of recovery. Some people are going through a time of grief. Some people have lost everything. When we were leaving, wasn't sure if we were gonna come back to a home because Tallahassee was scheduled to get more of a direct hit than it did. And I don't even, you and I've talked about this a little bit. I don't even
Right.
feel like, I definitely, hey, I give God praise,
Right.
but I don't give God praise in the way that diminishes that there were other people praying to
Mhm.
have a different outcome too.
Right, as well. Yeah.
They were praying to have a different outcome. And I don't want to minimize what other people have gone through and are going through in this season.
For
I've worked
sure.
for some organizations, worked with some organizations even now that are having to help with the aftermath. And it's a lot.
Mhm.
It is a lot. And we're just praying that God continue to bless people to come through,
Yeah.
just to come
Yeah.
through. So just know that we're praying with you and for you. Man,
Yeah.
yeah, it's rough,
They're very sad. Yeah.
very sad. So tonight we're going to talk about bringing God into your marriage. And hey, what's going on,
Hey,
V?
V.
What's going on?
Amen. Yeah.
We're going to talk about bringing God into your marriage. And there's a video on TikTok, and we're going to share that video. Listen to a little short clip of it. If
Mhm.
you want to catch it all, you can go on TikTok and listen to the whole thing on yourself. But I want to catch some of the opening of that video. And I want to talk about our journey
Mhm.
of bringing God into our marriage over 26 years. And this guy is going to make a very, very pungent point. So I need you to just kind of stick with him. And we're going to talk about how this modeled out and showed up in our own marriage,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And what it means to bring God into your marriage. When should God come into your marriage? All of that. And I know there's a lot of believers out there. You're going to watch, you're going to see, and you're going to be like, oh, God's all in my marriage. Is he?
Mhm.
Is he? We kind of thought he
Right.
was.
Right.
But is he really in your marriage? Boy, that's
Yeah.
tough to say. That's tough to say. So, yeah, we're gonna.
It really makes you think.
It makes you think.
Mhm.
It makes you stop. It makes you think. And yeah, is God really there? Is he in your marriage? So we're gonna. I'm
And
gonna.
not only is he there, when did I bring him in or
Yeah.
decide to include him?
Yeah, when did I decide to include him
Right.
is super important. So we're going to bring up this video, and we want you to definitely hear what the brother is saying here. So let's go.
In ideal terms, then we speaking in extreme terms that are possible but may not be true for everybody. I think what's true for the general body is that whatever your religion is, God ain't got nothing to do with who you dating, why you think you should be married. I'm gonna dig a little further, don't worry. It was a lot of clapping, hooting, hollering, cutting up, and carrying on when Kitty was saying what she was saying. But the most important part was talking about being called into wifehood, which means that you have an understanding prior to being married that this is a part of your duty to the Most High. So when I say for most folks, God ain't got nothing to do with why you out here dating who you dating and looking at who you, I mean that you didn't invite God until it was time for the wedding. And he was just on the guest list. It wasn't the authoritative figure, just on the guest list. Lord, I think I got her. If you don't mind sliding through, I would like to make an honest woman out of her. As opposed to, Lord, is this her? When I meet her, Lord, is this her? Make it obvious, right? Am I supposed to be with this person? Am I supposed to be amongst these? And I'm not condemning nobody or nothing like that. I'm just saying that it was a whole lot of noise for something I think a whole lot of people don't really be doing. Because covenant is a different thing. We're not just talking about marriage, right? When she's talking about being called into wifehood, this is to say that, like in the Bible, it says a man that find a wife findeth a good thing. Now, before we flex on that, you have to understand that every man is not called to find one.
Come on, King.
Look at how many great men in the Bible did not have one. Yep. That wasn't a part of his work. That wasn't a part of how he was chosen to honor God. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the way we've made tradition out of everybody being married and everybody should, that's not true according to the tradition you're trying to base it in. And so if every man is not called to husbandry, then that means that every woman is truthfully not called. And I'm not saying this to be disparaging. I'm saying if God got something to do with why you get married, whether that's a law, whether that's, I don't care what you call it. Go to that first. Do you understand how many problems that would solve if you profess to be a person of faith? Why is your faith not with you when you out here dating? That's what I'm saying. You're talking about right here, you got to have done your work and been called on your journey with God before we start talking about marriage and husbands and wives and stuff like that. That's what, like, bro, and I'm not, my fault to drag.
Woo!
Tight.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good.
It's tight.
Very thought provoking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very. Let's get into it. Let's dig into this thing because when did you invite God into your marriage? Like, and we've said this before, we talk about it. A lot of times we pick the person we want and then ask God to bless it after the fact.
Right, we do.
Right? We pick the person we want and then after the fact we say, God bless it. But I love something that he says. He said, why is God not out here with you while you're dating?
Right.
I can look at it for us and say, like, we didn't know better to a certain degree. Like, we knew we have God, but well, let me speak for me. I can't speak for you.
Okay.
You can say if this is the same for you.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak for me. Yes, I knew God and I was a professing believer. However, I had not been taught to take God into all situations. I would really had only been taught to bring God into times of trouble, not into times of prosperity, not into times of joy, not into times of peace. I really been trained, and most believers, if they being honest, have really only been taught to bring God into the bad places. So when I got this relationship under control, God, I don't need you.
Right.
Right? But God, when this relationship is struggling or I want out of it or whatever, oh God, we turn into Smokey Norfolk. I need you now. Like, I need you now. Yeah. Ow! Not another second.
Right.
Or another minute.
When it goes left.
Not an hour, another day. This girl is acting up. Oh Lord. And I need you right away.
Right away. Now.
Like, right? I need you like right then. But while I'm out here dating, she got the right curve. She got the right look. She got this. She got that. She seemed to be nice. Yada, yada, yada. You know what I'm saying? Now I ain't even thinking about God. Right? We like, you know what I'm saying? You, instead of saying who can I run to, you talking about who can I run to, you think about the person. You ain't thinking about God. Right? And he's talking about how you need to have God. Where's God then? And then he say, you only invite God to the wedding as a guest.
That was good.
Oh man, he killed it when he said that.
Yeah.
You only invited God to the wedding as a guest. And to be honest, there are a lot of marriages, because we've been one, that God was just a guest in the house. He was not Lord over the marriage.
Oh, for sure. But now, are you saying, because we're going back to these 26 years, that you didn't pray or consult God before getting married?
I'm going to tell you. I tell you about the knowing. And that's what's so odd after how these 26 years have played out. I knew you were the woman So when Adam went to sleep and he woke up,
Mhm.
no one had to tell him who this person was staring at him. They didn't have to tell. I mean, he could look and say, "Well, she's built differently than me because they're naked, right?"
Right.
But then he goes in, and Adam goes deep, and he says, "Now this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh,"
Mhm.
right? Let me just pull this up. Adam goes in and he's like, "This is bone of my bone, this is flesh of my flesh." No one had to tell him. God didn't tell him, "Hey, I made this woman just for you."
Right.
Right? God didn't have to tell him that at all. What Adam knew was he said, "Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm sorry. We were reading Genesis. I had the mic muted over here. Thank you, Brandon. Um, but we was talking about how in Genesis, when Adam walked, it says, I'm gonna read it again. Here we go. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to man. And Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they are both naked in the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." And so, what I was saying is, when God woke Adam up,
Mhm.
no one had to tell him who it was. At first, he said, "Here is who she is as an individual. She's a woman. Here
Mhm.
is who she is to me. She's a
A
wife."
wife. Right.
Right?
Mhm.
And so when we
The sound.
go and we talk about, we look in these relationships, it's like, when do you bring God into the relationship? And if God is not in and listen, if God is not in the relationship during the dating,
Mhm.
God is not in the relationship.
Right.
One of the things I would even stress to those who are dating: take sex out the mix
Mhm.
until you know that y'all are getting married. Matter of fact, until the night of y'all's post nuptial vows and whatever. Take sex out of the mix until you have made the vows before God.
Yeah.
That's how you bring God into it, because
For
you say,
sure.
"God, I'm going to do this your way."
Mhm.
And when I look back in hindsight within our marriage, right? Even though we said God was there and there was some fruit,
Mhm.
it wasn't the abundance of a fruit that could have been there,
Right. Agreed.
right?
Mhm. So you're saying you had the knowing.
I had the knowing. So, oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, you did ask me. So let me get back to the answer to the question.
Okay.
So I had the knowing,
Mhm.
and most of the men that I've talked to, I was like, "How you knew that was wife?" They said, "I can't tell you," but they knew within weeks. I don't think every man I've ever talked to that has experienced the knowing said they knew in 6 months or less.
Mhm.
Most of them knew within weeks
Right.
that this is the woman that God has sent for me. They knew it. I'm going to talk about the dangerous part of knowing in a minute, but
Mhm.
they knew. And I cannot explain to you, none of them have been. I was like, "How did you know?" you don't know why you know, you just know.
So have you talked to anyone who's had the knowing but has since then divorced or separated?
Yes. So
Okay.
now
Hmm.
that's the dangerous part about the knowing.
Hmm. So you are saying the knowing is associated with, hey God, this is Eve.
Like this is, it's not even on. So when I experienced the knowing for you,
Hmm.
it wasn't. I didn't get a warm, tingly feeling in my pants.
Right.
Girl, you was hot now. Hey, pretty hot and tempting. Yeah, but I didn't get a knowing and the tingling in my pants.
Hmm.
In truth be told, because I experienced the knowing, but didn't keep going with God in that knowing, it started us out at the wrong place.
Hmm.
And there's consequences for that. So, but when I experienced the knowing, it was like, hey, God, um, it was just an inner feeling in my chest.
Hmm.
Like, this is her. I don't know why it's her, but is this her?
All right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay. So for me, I did pray.
Hmm.
So for me, it was prayer. It's going, you know, is this the person? It was conversations back and forth with God. And so for me, the hardest part was not then, but later in the marriage when it seemed like it derailed and, we were going crazy. And so my question then was like, for me, there was a time where I was like, God, no, this is not it. Did I really hear your voice at this point? Like, do I know your voice? Do is this what you said? This cannot be
Right.
what you signed off or agreed upon for me, right? And so it was just me making it about me at that point. And so I had to question, like, really, did you say what you said? Did I hear what um what I heard? Did I hear that? Yes. Did I hear this is the one? Did I hear, and for me, I even went back with like it's not all of the expectations I had prior when I was like, oh, this is the husband or the list of all of the things
Hmm.
or the preferences that I wanted that wasn't necessarily checked off. I still had that conversation. Hey, God, what about this? What about this? And it was reassured that hey, this is your person or this is the one.
So that brings me to the danger of the knowing.
Mm-hmm.
We have a tendency to make God look schizophrenic,
We do.
not just in relationships, but
Yeah.
just in general.
Period.
We have a tendency to say, "Oh, God said this," and then as soon as the growing pain for
Mm-hmm.
having that
Right.
comes, whether it's the job, whether it's the relationship, whether it's the house, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
the children, all of a sudden, God ain't sure. We
Right.
start making God look very, very schizophrenic,
We did.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But we forget that the lie of the enemy from the very beginning has never changed. It is for you to doubt God's word and to doubt God's character.
Mm-hmm.
The enemy's strategy has never changed. Because if I can get you to doubt his word, then you by action have doubted his character, which means now you are going to be out of his will,
Mm-hmm.
which means now you're going to forfeit what he has given you.
Right. Yep.
Because most of the things that we say the enemy has stole have not been stolen at all.
Mm-hmm.
We have forfeited
Forfeited.
it.
Yep.
You took it to the pawn shop through your actions.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't steal it. You pawned it.
Right.
Esau.
Yeah. That's what I always go to that. Yeah.
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 You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So the dangerous part about the knowing is that it really, so in our season of um friction and dying in our
Mm-hmm.
marriage,
Right.
in our season of friction and dying in our marriage, it really, at least for me and the journey I went through and the expression that I went through, was like, God, I want to do this, but God is saying, I need you to trust me with this. Because if you believe that this is the person I have for you,
Right.
then you can't stop believing that because
Right.
adversity has come,
Exactly.
right?
And because it doesn't look like how you want it to look,
Yeah, well,
especially at this point,
yeah,
because
is
we try to put God in the same time frame as we do,
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
or we have.
where I want to be careful with that saying that statement, and it doesn't look like where you're supposed. There are certain things that are not supposed to happen in marriage.
Yeah.
Period.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
But they happen,
Right.
and when they happen, you have to decide in that moment, God, am I going to still trust you? So, going over to Jeremiah, I think it's the 18th chapter when it talks about how the potter, how the potter, go down to the potter's house, right? And it said that the vessel was marred in the potter's hands,
Right.
right? Oh, come on, God. So the vessel was marred in the potter's hand, and it said, and the potter basically made it again, right? So I want to. Oh my goodness, I want to get y'all this. I want to get you this. The word which came to Jeremiah came from the Lord, saying, "Arise and go down to the potter's house." Let me go over here. Let y'all see it. Arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause you to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and there he was making something at the wheel. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hands of the potter. So it means it had developed an imperfection.
Right.
So he made it again into another vessel as it seemed good to the potter to make. So I want you to picture our marriage was on the wheel, and it became marred
Right.
in the potter's hands, God's hands. But God didn't say, oh, let me throw this lump of clay away and then get a new lump of clay.
Right.
What God said is, okay, I'm going to take this. If you'll leave this mud, this clay in my hands, I can make it into a new vessel.
Right.
Again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's the question. Will you stay in his hands when the marriage gets lumpy? Will you stay in his hands when the marriage is misformed? Will you stay in his hands when the marriage looks like it is utterly and irreparably broken?
Right.
If he said it in the beginning, will you leave it in his hands? And sadly, for many of us, the answer is no.
Right.
I can't leave this in your hands. God, I got to take control.
Right. And not saying that it's an easy thing to do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We ain't saying you're being cavalier.
Right. Right. Yeah. Not saying that, oh, it's easy to do or whatever, because one, we're human, and one, we tend to bow to our feelings more.
Ooh.
Yeah, bow to our feelings and our emotions.
Matter of fact, when he talks about you put God on the guest list at your wedding, right? You put God on the guest list at your wedding.
Right.
What's crazy about him saying that is, when you just said that, it triggered to me is we put God on the guest list at our wedding, not the authority, but our feelings are what's the authority on that day.
Right. For sure.
Our feelings.
Yeah.
Right. When we do and we perform wedding ceremonies,
and I was gonna say this, even for the people that still make it, when you were saying that, and I was listening to the young man, for some, even knowing that they're not even supposed to still marry this person or marry the person on that day, but then again, bowing and led by those emotions of
feelings.
Yeah, like I can't be, ego, pride, I can't be embarrassed, or we've paid all the money, or we'll make it work,
or I done put it all over social media and everybody know about it, and I done said this my person and blah blah blah. Listen, if God ain't in it, if God ain't in it, I've been asked.
I can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been asked more than once about, like, what's the importance of God in your marriage, and I'm like, everything, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have something to take, if you don't have someone or something right to take your problems to, take your challenges to, guide you even in the good days, you're in a world of trouble.
All right.
You need something higher than yourself for your marriage to be accountable to,
All right.
right? And it's
That-
good to have marriage mentors and all of that, but you
Mhm.
at the end of the day, your marriage needs to be accountable to God.
Mm-hmm.
You're about to say,
Bottom line.
yeah, yeah,
No, I was about to say that. I think a lot of times you say that can hold it, the
hmm
mold. That
yeah.
can hold it. Yeah.
It is. It is absolutely the mold
Mm-hmm.
that your marriage fits into
Mm-hmm.
is God. God is able to handle the heat of
Mhm.
bringing two into one.
Right.
But we put that into so many things that cannot handle the heat.
Mm-hmm. Even us.
Yeah.
We can't handle the heat, but he
Yeah.
can.
He can.
All right.
Yeah. And so in 26 years, I don't think we really fully, one, understood, and
We
two,
didn't.
actually brought God in his fullness until we got to year 16, 17,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Because unfortunately, churches do not do a good job about teaching biblical marriage.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do it.
Right.
They don't do it. Y'all don't do it.
Right. And not even just church, because
Spiritual leaders.
we do put that on church and spiritual leaders, but it starts where? At home. So
At
it's your
home.
home before you even go to church, especially if you're saying you're a Christian, believing home.
Mm-hmm.
It's what do I teach them in there before I ever take them out the door to church, and then depend on the church to teach them. The church is there for a reason for sure, but then I think a lot of times we put so much on the church as their responsibility to do, when it's our responsibility as well. And that's happened a lot, because if you ever think about PK kids,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the things that go with that, and then just church kids in general, a lot of times, especially if you're raised how do I just
Churchy.
churchy churchy, right? For a lot of at the end of the day, you realize as you just grow and know, and of course everybody is growing somewhere, that what you have or thought you had wasn't of substance.
Yeah.
It wasn't really um deeply rooted and grounded.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why I was kind of like, because even in the house, they can only teach what they know, and if that house didn't learn,
Mm-hmm.
like that house can teach a lot of practical things,
Right.
but that house may not teach a lot of spiritual things concerning marriage,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they still are going to have a deficit.
Right.
They're going to have a deficit because I'm going to repeat what I grew up in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you grew up in a home with with a seemingly healthy marriage, what I would encourage you to do while you're dating, while you're engaged, while you're whatever, is to
Mhm.
look at the person that you're with, and before you start setting a path and a vision for your future marriage, I want you to say, what was the good, bad, and the ugly
Right.
about my parents' marriage, if
Mhm.
I'm being real with myself? Matter of fact, if your parents are still, if you have the type of relationship where you can engage your parents,
Right.
ask them, and they're still married, ask them, or even if they're divorced, ask them, like if they're divorced, ask them, how did you get there?
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
If they're still married, how did y'all get here?
Mhm.
What made y'all stay together all these years? How did you put yourselves aside so that y'all could thrive, and
Mhm.
not just he thrive, she thrive?
Mhm.
Get that wisdom. And
Yeah.
then it's like eating fish. Take the meat, spit out the bones.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah. I think a lot of times we aren't given the tools that we need, and then it's kind of expected to do the job. So when you say you're in the house, if you
Mhm.
didn't have like a lot of conversation,
Yeah.
and for me, a lot of people lack just practical things, period. There are so
Yeah.
many practical things in relationships and marriages, if they were taught in the home, a lot of marriages would be better off.
Yeah.
Just some practical things, but a lot of times it's more of the unspoken, or you just
Yeah.
assume that, oh, they should have picked it up, or they should have gotten it. And of course, marriages are a little different, or homes are a little bit different, and communication wise, and talking to your children and letting them have voices and all of the things like we do. But there was a time where you didn't get to say much, so you could only observe.
Yeah.
And so then you only had your own assumptions,
Right.
and your perspective or perception about what it was, or what it,
Right.
what it may be. And
Right.
so you didn't get to actually have the conversations or ask the questions or really find out deeper. And so then you take that out and try to, duplicate it or do it all over, or say you're going to do it different, but you still have no guideline or no
Yeah.
tools to do so.
I, and that's
Yeah.
so powerful
Mhm.
because for me, if my stepfather was still here, see, I didn't even know I needed to ask certain questions.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how much he would actually open up and talk, because
Mhm.
that generation of men weren't necessarily taught to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many questions I would have for him about how he loved my mom through the difficult times,
Mm-hmm.
how
Right.
he loved me even through the difficult times.
Right.
Right? There's so many questions I have for him that I didn't even know I needed to ask. That's why I'm saying, if you have access to your parents,
Mm-hmm.
they may not answer, but ask the questions.
Right. And for me, I start the conversations because I know there are a lot of things, and they're children, so they don't know what to ask a lot of times, and they may ask you something. So, and those conversations are uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but they know. So there's times where I would start a conversation, with DJ or Shay about just life, and then about relationships and about marriage. And I talk to him all the time. Oh, your wife would like this, or I give him a general picture of women. Not every woman is the same, but some things that are pretty close that um most women have in common that they would like, common
Mm-hmm.
things. I'll try to share those with him so he'll know, or just practical things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we don't have those conversations. It's like having what they say, the birds and the bees, or the sex conversations and
Mhm.
stuff like that. They may be uncomfortable. They may be like, you know. And I think it's you have to know, one, your kid, but then like their age difference. Don't try to have a adult or a teenage conversation with a 5-year-old or an
Right.
8-year-old. So
Right.
use wisdom in that area. But as you see them getting of age and they're approaching these things, just kind of have those conversations with
Yeah.
them.
100%. I think that's important. Absolutely important.
Yeah, but we didn't have the questions to ask. We didn't know if we could even ask.
Ask. Right.
I know I was told some things, and we talked about that later, because
Mm.
this is the wife you need to be,
Right.
and do these things right here. And there was the general kind of things that you think,
Yeah.
all the wives need to do, cook and clean and all of the things. And I think a lot of times we don't teach them the things that they should know and just do for themselves
Right.
first. Period.
Right.
Period.
I will tell you, and if you go and listen to that whole video, and I think
Mhm.
he hit on a little bit of it, it's like you need to make sure
He
you're
did.
grounded and rooted with God
Mhm.
first, so that when you go on this marriage covenant mission,
Mm-hmm.
you are doing it the right way.
Right.
I made a video this morning. I haven't put it out yet, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. So we came up from kind of two different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And the angle that I cover in my video is this: there's a reason that a lot of couples have conflict, and it's not what they think.
Right.
That reason is y'all are not actually arguing. Your normals are arguing.
Mm-hmm.
And your normals are not always the same. And to be honest, some of our normals
Mm-hmm.
are actually normal, and some of our normals is like, when you really look at it, like, that shouldn't be your normal,
Right.
right? But that, like, for example, I was talking with a young lady one time before, and she was saying, like, what was normal for her was to
Mm-hmm.
grow up in the house with a bunch of yelling, cussing, and fussing, or whatever. So she
Right.
didn't see a problem with when she raised her voice and gets out with, but her husband
Right.
didn't come up with that type of thing. So he had a problem with it, and so they had a conflict
Mm-hmm.
because she grew up seeing one thing and that was normal for her, but in
Right.
him it's like, no, 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 we don't talk to each other like that where
Right.
I was raised, so we're not doing that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so our normals sometimes throw us off
Mm-hmm.
because we're not really paying attention to the fact that, hey, so let me get into us. Let me get into us.
Okay.
Because I think this has played a factor at different points in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We both, I'm just give you my perspective.
Sure.
You can feel free to correct it. We both
Mm-hmm.
started out in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know we were poor, right?
What are you saying? No.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe you did. We didn't know because a
Right.
lot of everybody around us was poor for the
Right.
most part.
Exactly.
There was a handful. I can think of two kids that I grew up with that we kind of knew like their parents had money,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of us didn't.
Right.
But they still ran and played with us as
Mhm.
if most of them, well, one of them at least, ran and played with us as if they was as poor as we were,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we grew up in poverty. Then my mom married a great man,
Mm-hmm.
and it changed us, and we went from almost overnight, close to overnight, from being in poverty
Mm-hmm.
to being what would be equivalent of middle class.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Nice house and a nice place, you know what I'm saying? And not that our house that I was growing up in was a horrible house.
Right.
Um, but looking back on it, it ain't the house that, is
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm.
So, grew up nice house. Now my mom got a new car. We
Mm-hmm.
used to run hand-me-down cars. They brought a brand new car, still with the stickers on it, blue on the tires, all of that. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? And through life, now I'm in a two-parent home
Mm-hmm.
that is stable and healthy. And you pointed out something
Mm-hmm.
when we were talking about this. You were talking about the stability that comes up,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but before I got out of poverty,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize I was already in survival mode,
Right.
right? Because that's what my environment called to me and automatically put you into.
And you're saying before your mom married
It
your
is,
step,
yeah.
right?
I was in
'Cause you,
survival mode, but
mm-hmm.
once I got into the stable mode, it's like I can actually go in there. We was talking about the cornflakes. We still had cornflakes that I had to put the sugar on, but that wasn't associated with poverty because guess what? This
Right.
time when I had them,
Uh-huh.
I had them with the little rooster on the box. Before, when I had cornflakes that looked like that, it wasn't a rooster on the box. It was a government, that big white and black box with the government cereal on it or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So, you know what I'm saying? So,
okay.
I can remember the
I
big old
had the
hunks of
rooster,
cheese.
so
Well,
should
you
I?
got I guess you was a little richer than thou,
So it's
right?
what? No, but I want to say they gave out like if you got Wix or something at one point, you could get the one with the rooster.
But we, at that point, I don't know,
Right.
maybe y'all, and see, we lived in two different states.
Right.
In my
That
state,
and I know my mom sometimes just flat out brought them because that's the brand she liked and those were the
and
good
y'all
ones.
lived in the city.
And we lived in the city. You're
So
right.
it's a little bit different.
You're right. We
When you
lived
live
in
in
the
the
city.
rural South Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
you went down or they dropped off
Mm-hmm.
the big old box, or you got the big old commodities box,
Mm-hmm.
and it had the big old block of cheese.
Oh, don't do us. We got commodities too.
Yeah, and we had the powdered milk,
Right.
and we had
Indeed.
the black and white box of cereal. We had what? Hey,
You said the cheese, the
yeah,
peanut
the
butter.
cheese,
Okay.
the big old block of. You got 1 pound of butter, that big
Mm-hmm.
old chunk of
Mm-hmm.
butter,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Wasn't the 4 sticks?
No, wasn't the 4 sticks. You got the
Right.
big old block of butter. You know what I'm saying? You got some lard. I think we got lard.
Did you? Maybe
Yeah,
so?
maybe, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, we came out of that.
Right.
But then I grew up the majority of my life in a two-parent home.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up seeing a relatively healthy marriage. There were seasons of unhealthiness in it, but I grew up seeing a relatively healthy marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And then I married someone who did not see those things,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And you bring those two things together.
Right. Well, I didn't see those things in the house with me, but they were close by because I did spend a lot of time with my godparents who are still married now. But you're right, I wasn't
Yeah.
in the home with that.
Yeah, it in that's very helpful that you at least had some example,
Mm-hmm.
but being in the house with it is different because it's just
Right.
a different level of accountability that
It
also
is.
comes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some people don't even get to have people that are close to them
Right.
to have it. And this is the thing for me, not to bring up your godparents. So my aunt Teen, until I think I was an adult, she was married and good, or I was in my late teens or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. She was married, so I
Right.
saw that, what I'm saying, and that was a far off or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
And my aunt and uncle as well, but of course
yeah,
that was after we moved here.
right.
Yeah, or moved back to the country.
But you bring into the house where
Mhm.
those two things have not necessarily happened, and this is what I've seen happen in some guys that I've mentored
Mhm.
around marriage. They would, and sometimes, especially I've seen this, and I've just not mentored a lot of ladies around marriage for obvious reasons, but mentored guys around marriage, and
Mhm.
what they end up dealing with is like they grew up in a healthy home and
Mhm.
their wife did not, and it's almost like and I've had more than one of them tell me, it's almost like their wife feels the need to, like, you think you're better than me because you grew up this way and I'm gonna show you,
Right.
right? And they dealt with that. Now I've also heard the flip side of that with women. I just
Mhm.
don't have as much experience with it, the
Mhm.
up close where I got to ask questions.
Right.
And so they would try and like tell them, no, babe, like this is normal. It's not
Mhm.
normal for these things to be this way or that way, because I grew up in this environment. And I'm not talking about your environment. I'm not looking at you as less than. I'm not looking at any of that, but I'm saying let's leverage
Mhm.
the normal.
Right.
Let's leverage our normal,
Right.
right? The normal I grew up in. And guess what? Let's also establish some of our new normals, because everything that went down in my house wasn't the
Mhm.
way it was supposed to go down. So I'm aware
Exactly.
of that,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times what's at odds
Mhm.
is our normals are competing.
Mhm.
Your normal against my normal,
Right.
right? I don't think I'm better than you because I grew up in a two-parent home,
Right.
right? It did create a different type of stability for me,
Mhm.
but I don't think I'm better.
Right. And you do have to bring those two normals together and help leverage them. There's are conversations and things around those that you have to have,
Yes.
and that you have to show humility
Yeah.
to accept and
Yes.
go, oh, okay, because it was different.
Yes.
Right. So you
Yes.
have to accept it and know, oh, they're not telling me this or, saying these things to hurt me, but
Yeah.
to help us actually. And
Right.
then how do we build and go from there? Because
And
a lot of times if you're broken, and I know that was for me, and I'm just
mhm.
speaking for me, sometimes those things do hit different, or you do feel like, oh, they think this, or,
Yeah.
oh, he think he's better, or, the way
Right.
how it comes off sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think, and this is one of the things that happens around, even with infidelity. People usually who cheat, they usually find common ground with the person they cheat with.
Mhm.
In that common ground can produce this sense of like, oh, we have this connection, or you
Right.
get me, or you
Emotional
understand.
attachment.
And
Mhm.
reality is it's not. It's dysfunctional bonding
Mhm.
is what ends up happening.
Right.
But here's one of the things too, is like bringing God all the way back into it. And I'm just thinking how God is funny. He's interesting. I was built to stay because I saw a man who stayed who could have left.
Mm.
My stepfather didn't know all that what he was signing up for with my mom,
Mhm.
and her addiction or whatever, and different things, and he could have had every reason and excuse to leave.
Right.
You got this little hellion of a son, you got
For
this
sure.
drug, whatever, you
Yeah.
know what I'm
All
saying?
right.
He could have found, but he was a man, but he also grew up in a house with his parents his entire life.
Mhm.
So he wasn't raised to quit either, and that got push to me
Mhm.
like you don't quit,
Right.
right? And so I just find that funny how God just kind of he plants the seeds
Mhm.
in our lives if we let him take.
Right. And the seeds did come up because he was able to see the fruit
Yeah,
and enjoy it before he passed away.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So when we talk about bringing God in, I want to give you three things to do to bring him in, right? Three
Mhm.
things that I think we've done. One is spend some personal time building a personal relationship with God.
Mhm.
Going to church is one very small, tiny piece of building a relationship with God.
Mhm.
Reading your word, digging into your Bible,
Mhm.
spending time in prayer,
Right.
spending time meditating on His word,
Mhm.
right? Not just reading it, but meditating on it,
Right.
learning it,
Right.
letting it get from your head to your heart.
Mhm.
Spend some time developing a personal relationship with God so that He can direct you,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
The second thing is then make that a couple action. That's one of the things that again we've got to get better at again,
Mhm.
which is doing one of the fun things I enjoy doing with you is when we get into a good biblical discussion.
Right.
Because then
Yeah.
we usually, unless we're in the car riding on a trip, we
Mm.
usually always get into them at the worst possible time.
Right. It'll start really
Yeah.
good and then we go
Oh, I got a meeting, or I
right.
got to go do
Tired.
this, or let me run this store, or
Mhm.
but we'll get into like make it a habit to
Mhm.
build spiritual routine and spiritual oneness together.
Right.
Get into His Word together,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
It is so much like when I'll find a new revelation in the word, or you'll be like, I was just reading today, or we start listening to a podcast of spiritual. Like the other day we was riding home and we're listening to the podcast, and the podcast almost over, the episode on YouTube, but we done paused it and talked for about an hour.
Right.
And then
Right.
like, okay, you going to finish them last
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Right. Start it back up. Let's
Yeah,
finish
let's
now.
finish these
Right.
last 4 minutes.
Mhm.
Like the last 4 minutes,
Mhm.
but we done stopped. We in the car. We done talked for about an hour.
Right.
Develop a spiritual routine together
Mhm.
to where God is a common thing that's on both of y'all's lips.
Right. Yeah. Well, you said the most important thing first because I harp on this a lot. We are so undeveloped a lot of times spiritual wise,
Mhm.
and we forget that we are spiritual beings,
Yeah,
period. So we don't cultivate that part of who we are,
right,
period, and then able to do it with someone else and
right,
connect spiritually as well.
right. You
Yeah.
got to connect spiritually as an individual. You got to, I always go back to Genesis. I'm telling y'all, if you let God open Genesis up to you,
Mhm.
you will understand that there is so much
Mhm.
meat in Genesis
Yeah.
about just life.
Period. Yeah.
But one of the things that we point out and pull out in Genesis, so God made the heavens and the earth, He did all of that.
Mhm.
After He made the heavens and the earth, and He made man, the woman was nowhere to be found. So God had alone time with Adam.
Mhm.
Okay. So
Right.
when we're talking about developing your own personal relationship, remember God had alone time with Adam. Now, when He put Adam to sleep and He formed a woman, we do not know how long Adam was asleep,
Mhm.
but God also had alone time with the woman,
Right.
even
Yeah.
if it was just for while He was forming her.
Mhm.
He had alone time with the woman.
He did.
You both have to have your own personal relationships.
Mhm.
Then you have to have a relationship with Him in corporate together
Right.
as one.
Mhm.
Then here's the third thing that you need to do: call out and address bad fruit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Don't,
Yeah. So you have to actually work on it, just like you work on your individual. You
yeah,
have to work on it together, and that's not just saying we go to church
Yeah.
or
No.
we go to church together.
Look for bad fruit.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any rotten fruit that starts to show up in your relationship, address it
Mm-hmm.
immediately in love and kindness and meekness and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
but address it
Right.
immediately. Deal with the fruit. Be fruit inspectors.
Mm-hmm.
Hold each other accountable. Do not allow fruit to just go bad
Mm-hmm.
in your relationship.
Yeah.
Deal with the bad fruit. So
Was that all three?
that's all three. Individual,
Together.
together,
Mm-hmm.
and inspect the fruit.
Fruit. Okay. The inspection was number 3.
Yeah, because and I say that because in hindsight, and it wasn't even so much in hindsight, but in hindsight, in the full autopsy, in the aftermath, I could see the fruit
Mm-hmm.
that was not healthy, that was not good,
Right.
and I didn't address the bad fruit.
Right.
If you don't address the bad fruit, it's not gonna be
Mhm.
it's not gonna go well,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
For
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
So
Neither one. We didn't have those conversations or do those inspections.
right,
Mhm.
be a fruit inspector
Mhm.
always. So you got anything you want to add?
Not that I can think of to after the show.
To after the show.
No,
All right.
we're
You know,
good.
after the show, she'll have a whole bunch of stuff that she want to add. Listen, we appreciate you for checking in, hanging in with us. Listen, when the time change, I want y'all to know. When that hour fall back, we going to fall back an hour too.
Mm-hmm. And I just checked that the other day. It's November. What?
November the 2nd or the 3rd.
Third, yeah.
I already done looked.
Oh, you too.
So when the hour falls back, we going to fall back too, which means Late Night Marriage with the Riches is going to go live at 9 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. So we're going to catch y'all a little bit earlier, and that's going to be our new time. But we're going to
Our
wait.
new late night.
That's going to be our new late night. We're getting older. That's our new late night.
More mature.
Yeah, more mature. But we want to have a little bit of
Wow.
time that we can unwind and unwrap and play footsies and all of that good stuff. And we can't do that if we stay up too late with y'all.
Well, we're trying to not be as much of late hours that we already are.
I'm trying not to be as much of a late hour. My wife, it's going to take her 3 hours to unwind, and she ain't going to bed to 1:30, 2 o'clock anyway. I'm going to sleep, people. I'm going to sleep.
He is.
So listen, we thank you for joining us for another episode of Late Night Marriage with the Riches. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Tell a neighbor, tell a friend. We've got to get in one more live event before the year is out. We got to. We're going to do it. So anyway,
So we're going to do it.
we love you guys. We thank you
Working
for
on it.
joining us. Keep us lifted in prayers. We're going to pray for you, and we pray that your relationship is abundant, it is fruitful, and if there's any rotten fruit, it's on the way out. Remember this Late Night Marriage with the Riches. Lights off, transparency on, and we'll catch you on the next episode. God bless.
We love you for real. Good night.